On set now, we are joined by Sam Chester of Clarity Capital for further insight on the growing drone market. Harvard Business Review recently listed it as one of the top 8 trends to watch in 2016. Thank you very much for being with us.
It's a pleasure.
Well, what can we expect for the drone market in 2016?
Well, I would highlight 4 key trends right off the bat. First, consumer attention, which the best example was Amazon, the world's largest supplier of products, just announced a month ago that their new product delivery via drone is going to be coming out hopefully sometime in the next year. So Amazon getting it out there, attracting a lot of consumer interest right around the Christmas shopping time. That was one big sort of 2015 trend. The others I would quickly point to is, as you mentioned in the video, the numbers went up, the revenues went up. This is an industry which, while 90% dominated by military sales, the small sliver of this multi-billion-dollar industry that is civilian sales is really, it's in a perfect storm where it's about to explode. And as some of the data you mentioned in the previous video, the growth trends really for the civilian sector are expected to grow annually by 10% over the next few years. The last 2 points quickly, again, regulatory rules are coming together. The FAA in the US, until a month ago, the rules were all over the place. There was confusion between business drones and consumer drones. The US government, followed by Europe, followed by China, they're starting to get the rules into play, and that's obviously key on the business side. And then the last part, of course, which the previous video was really about, is China's role. China is really taking the lead, again, in the civilian space. In that 10% of about a $5 to $10 billion market, China is really moving to the fore. The best example is the one that you mentioned again in the video. DJI is the largest consumer drone manufacturer in the world, and they're really the only company you can point to in China's business space of a company where a Chinese company is really #1 in the world in a particular sector. So that's...
Well, why has China been able to arrive here at the forefront of this big trend?
Part of it is the timing really issue, and part of it is the government focus. China's government, Beijing, is particularly interested in areas such as telecom and in robotics, and they've given a lot of support for these elements. Like everywhere else, the civilian drone sector often is a rollover from the military side where a lot of the funding is focused. So some of the funding that has gone toward the military has rolled over into the Chinese. And then the final space that Chinese firms have really taken advantage of, like many sectors in China, is the price point. Chinese firms, as we know well, in many industries, are great at producing something quickly and efficiently for a low price, and they jumped into drones early on. Let's remember, civilian drone technology and products are very immature. The market is still not fully developed. So the Chinese were able to get in early on and really mass produce cheap products in a space that others in the world haven't been able to keep up.
Interesting. So you mentioned price here. How much is this market actually worth in China?
Well, right now the Chinese on the civilian side isn't quite where it could be, and you have several large firms that are really dominating, DJI, Unique, and others. I think what you can point to, though, is the interconnection between China and the global marketplace. Just in the last 3 months, over $300 million have been invested into the Chinese civilian drone space by global investment firms. Intel was one of the major investors. So when you see that capital coming into the Chinese space, you can see that the Chinese firms are positioned to really grow all the more so. There's about 400 companies in China today in 2015, moving into 2016, that are working in the drone space, and those numbers are expected to grow all the more so in the next year plus.
Interesting. Well, you mentioned that China is very big on the civilian industry. What about Israel? Where does it fall?
Israel's is really a great example here, because if you just look up drones on the most basic superficial level, all you'll do is read about Israel. Israel is the leading exporter of drones in 2015. Over 60% of drones in the world are from Israel. Israel is the country that basically invented the industry in the 1970s. But there's one key word to remember here, is that Israeli drone focus is very much on the military side. A lot Israeli firms are really falling behind on the civilian side, and the civilian sector is really where the exciting growth is poised to take off. I mean, the military sector is huge, and it's going to get most of the money and most of the tech, but it's the civilian side that is poised to really go places.
And that's a fascinating point, because we see that here quite a lot in the startup nation. A lot of innovations come from the military side, and then we see them take form into the civilian side. So that should be very interesting to see where that goes as well. If also Israeli startups can devise new ways to maximize that market. But what does that lead us here in Israel for the 2016 year?
So it's like what you said. We have to really find the best practices. There's one company I would point to, Dronomy, an Israeli company. Their background is in military, and yet they're now shifting solely to the civilian space. Israel really needs to focus more on finding technical solutions to the really challenging technical challenges that everyone in the global drone civilian space is facing. Israelis can be positioned and be in a place to really make a difference.
Well, thank you so much for joining us in the studio and bringing this insight on the drone market from China and here to Israel and the Startup Nation. That wraps up our show today. Stay tuned here every day for all your global economic coverage. I'm Natalie Ehrlich from the Jaffa Report. Thank you very much for watching.